before we get started? Thank you all for joining us today in the middle of the holiday season. I appreciate that. I think it's important enough to bring everybody in despite that to discuss the proposals that are put in front of us. Anybody got anything they want to bring up before we move to our guests who want to introduce their proposals? Scott, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Good here.
Thank you, Joyce. Appreciate everybody else coming in today. All right. If the Golden Shovel representative, Dan and Bethany, would like to move forward, we appreciate it. We're all in here and some of us are online.
Great. Thank you so much. And it's so nice to meet you all. I know I speak for Bethany as well, and she'll have a chance to introduce herself and her background as well as what her team does. She's the primary point of contact for putting together strategy pieces like this along with her team. And I'm Dan Armitage. I'm from the Midwest originally, and I'm the territory manager for not just the state, but much of the region as well. So I just wanted to start off with saying how nice it is to meet you all. And Bethany, if you'd like to take it from here and introduce yourself, and then we can get into the presentation as well.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. We definitely appreciate your time, and as mentioned, know that it is the holiday season, so it's not necessarily the best time to be adding another meeting to your calendar, but we appreciate you being here with us anyway. I am Executive Vice President for Golden Shovel Agency. I'm very familiar with your area in that we have a lot of clients in Kansas. I also live one additional, what was that?
You froze on me. Froze on, yeah.
Oh, I froze on you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. We do have one other member of our team that will be joining us. Looked like he sent me a message. He was having a bit of issues getting on, but Ron Kresha should be here soon. He's one of the co-founders of our company. He's also an elected official, so he has really a broad range of experience when it comes to polling and constituent research. So I wanted him to be able to be here and meet you as well. So I guess just keep an eye out and see if I see him in the waiting room at some point.
And what was his last name? I'm sorry.
Kresha, Kresha.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Give me a second and make sure you guys can see that. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
It's coming through great.
All right. Perfect. Okay, so we wanted to chat with you today, obviously, about your very pressing need, which is to find out whether or not people in your community would support a ballot measure to help fund economic development activities. And we know that it's very important to you to find out where they're at now and maybe how we can move the needle to get them to be willing to support economic development. There's going to be a lot of opportunities that are coming out in the next couple of years, especially as the administration pushes for the onshoring of manufacturing. So it's definitely a good time to be in economic development as long as you have the funding to really push your priorities forward. So this proposal, I definitely want to make sure that you get a copy of it in your inbox. So I'm sure you'll see that later today if you haven't already. But I did want to give you a little bit of background on Golden Shovel, who we are and what we do. So we work exclusively with economic development organizations. Because we are so focused on the industry, we have a depth of experience and best practices that we bring to the table in all of our work, which benefits organizations like yours because you don't have to educate us on what economic development is or what you're trying to accomplish. It is a very niche industry that a lot of organizations struggle to understand. Fortunately, this is all we do. We do speak at conferences throughout the country and are very proud of the white papers and free educational resources that we put out to help educate people that are involved in economic development. We have been in business for over 15 years. We have over 290 clients. I will show you some of our clients that are in Kansas here coming up. But before we talk about that, we want to talk about really what we're talking about in regards to how we would help you. So our recommendation is that you start with constituent research and polling services to really take a data-driven approach to this ballot measure, not only to find out are they going to support the measure, but what messages would resonate and get voters excited. So part of this process really begins with the voter identification. So identifying a sample of voters who are most likely to vote in a ballot measure. Obviously, that's very important because you have over 53,000 registered voters in the presidential election. I believe you had around 35,000, 34,000 that voted. You're not going to get that turnout for a ballot measure. So it's really important that we're going to identify who is most likely to vote so we can get in front of them quickly. Excuse me one moment. This is Ron calling. I want to make sure he can get on you, right? All right. He was restarting his computer and try again. Anyway, so it's really important that we find out who is most likely to cast their vote for this ballot measure. I know one of your communities last year put something out to the populace, for example, and I think out of 7,000 people in their community, around 1,700 voted. So again, it's finding out the exact people that are most likely to vote so we can get in front of them. And then the data collection piece is obviously very important. So we're going to be collecting data in multiple ways. The polling part of this includes outbound calling and texting. We want to get into conversations with folks, but we're also wanting to assess opinions online through a digital survey that we would create for you and promote. The nice thing about doing it both ways is we're able to reach more voters, because some people, quite frankly, don't want to answer the phone. Some people don't want to respond to a text. Some people don't want to participate online. So by offering 3 different ways for them to engage, we're broadening our audience and increasing response rates. And then we'd also like to host some interviews with people in your community that you feel maybe have some sway. People who are respected in the community. This could be business leaders, it could be nonprofit leaders, what have you, where we can interview them and get some of their thoughts, which really helps us in tailoring our messaging. And everyone, I do see that Ron has joined us. Ron, do you want to say hello real quick?
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
And I already explained to them that you are a co-founder of the company and an elected official with a lot of experience. I'm getting into the nuts and bolts of your wheelhouse at the moment with the constituent research and polling. So feel free to jump in as you see fit.
You're doing great. I'll just follow your lead.
There you go. Okay. So obviously, when we're collecting this information, the second phase is that we need to analyze it. So doing that demographic analysis, trying to figure out trends based on different populations and target audiences is really important, because when you move into that marketing and messaging phase, we understand that how you communicate with a retiree may be drastically different than how you need to communicate to a young mom who has different concerns. So we want to make sure that that analysis helps us to create profiles of each type of voter in your community based on what they care about and what messaging is most likely to get them engaged and wanting to vote yes for the ballot measure. And of course, understanding their sentiment. So what is the overall community attitude and any potential barriers to get support for this measure? That's what we want to flesh out. And then as a result of the polling services and the data analysis and interpretation, we're going to provide you with a strategy and reporting. So here's the messaging and communication strategy we recommend. Here are our findings, and here's actionable insights on what you can do next. And then really, we think that this ties together. Instead of just doing polling and then trying to do marketing separately, we view this a bit differently as kind of a three-phase process with polling, marketing, polling again, and then adjusting marketing as needed. So phase 2 would move into marketing and that second round of polling. With phase 2, we want to put messages out there based on each target audience, on the profile that we've created based on analyzing the data. And that's going to include us creating ads and social media content and social media videos, things that are very graphic rich, very dynamic, and things that are digestible. One of the challenges that communities have with this type of communication is it can be a little bit highfalutin. It can be difficult to understand how supporting a ballot measure is going to benefit the life of the individual voter. Our job is to personalize it so everyone understands how their family could potentially benefit from investing in economic development and economic growth. We also want to maintain text outreach, provide you with custom website content, an FAQ sheet, design collateral, social media ads, Google ads, articles written for the local newspaper that can be published, continue to gather data on who's viewing these things and how they're interacting and responding, and make sure that we report it to you. And then midway through that process, we want to do a check-in. We want to reach back out and do more polling to see how people view these messages. Are they resonating? Are we moving the needle in the right direction? And if not, that provides us with insight on how we need to adjust the campaign so that we can increase support for the ballot measure. So the marketing campaign, if it's not being as effective as we like, we would make adjustments at that time and continue with it.
Bethany?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna let you take a breath for a second. I just wanted to go back and add some clarification, and you don't have to go back a couple slides,
Yeah.
but the word sway was in there. These really aren't swaying campaigns, they're informed voter campaigns. What we see them as, you have a good proposal, we think you have the right approach, and our job is to create an informed voter base so that they have the right information and the right messaging as you go into it, because you're looking for improvement. This is not a political, test poll, push poll, that type of thing. This really is getting your successful efforts out and allowing you to make your case for why this would help expand businesses, build a better tax base, and just keep going down all the benefits of a good economic development proposal.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Ron. Definitely education is a huge piece, and that's something that we do really well, is educating the community, because we understand based on our experience that economic development is something that people really have a hard time grasping. The average resident doesn't even know what economic development is. They have no idea it's happening. They don't know why it needs to happen. And we've found that it's really important to educate and break it down into simple concepts like, how does this impact your residential taxes, right? If the tax base increases, maybe your taxes will end up going down. How does this impact the school system? How does this impact the future of your kids being able to stay in the community, or your grandkids being able to come back because there's better jobs? So we have to find ways to simplify it, and we've been really proud of the work we've done in doing that. Here you can see some of our Kansas clients: Dickinson County, Greater Hutch, Emporia, who I know you've spoken with, Hutchinson, Junction City, W. Creta. But, in your own backyard with Wyandotte, we've done an economic development 101 campaign, which is an education campaign. That's one of the many things that we've done for them. And it's been really effective because we've been able to do exactly what we're talking about, is simplify what is economic development, so people in the community gain a better understanding and can see how it can benefit their own personal lives. Another example of a Kansas client we've run a successful campaign, very successful campaign for recently, and it's ongoing, is a talent attraction campaign, trying to convince people to move from out of the state to rural Kansas. And it's worked, and people are moving. And again, that's an example of how we can take concepts and personalize them to folks to make them actually want to take action. Because there's nothing more time consuming or impactful than being willing to move your family, across the country. So we are very passionate about educating people and helping them to make that choice. All right. As I mentioned, Golden Shovel campaigns have won awards to organizations like IEDC and RITA, Mid-America EDC, etc. We do have testimonials we can provide from our clients, and I know that you've already reached out and have had personal conversations with them as well. I won't play this for you right now. But I know you've had those one-on-one conversations, and hopefully they've been able to provide some insight in what it's like working with us. We do have a 95% client retention rate, and that is because we really pride ourselves in going above and beyond. This contract obviously has a scope, but if you need something, our team is always there to adjust and to support you. It's something that we're very, very passionate about because we want you to be successful. All right, we have some examples of some of the team members that would be working on this campaign. Everyone on our team has had extensive experience in economic development, and our average tenure is 8 years, which is great because then you're getting people who really know what they're doing. And then in regards to what the budget would look like for this, so the initial polling services is coming in at 20,000. But we recommend again that you tie it all together because that's how you're going to test out whether your messaging is succeeding rather than doing polling here and then messaging over here and then just not knowing what the turnout's likely to be. So combined with that 3-step process, that would be an investment of $50,000. And I've spoken a lot. So what questions do you guys have?
Yeah, I'll start. Have any of your other counties and cities you've worked with had to do anything similar to what we're asking to be done as far as funding?
So we have had, Ron, go ahead and then I can comment.
Yeah, if you can just, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch your first name. Is that?
Yeah, Jeremy.
Oh, Jeremy, I'm sorry. And which aspect are you asking about? The polling side, the marketing side, the surveying? What specifically are you asking about our previous track record?
Well, our need is to solidify some funding. And I'm just curious if any of your previous campaigns have focused on funding or if they've focused on some other aspect of economic development.
Yeah, so, and I'll let Bethany give them more details, but the simple answer is yes. We've worked across the board with a number of entities for these types of campaigns. I know we've worked with Convergent, and who's the other one, Bethany, that has done the stakeholder and some of the long-term planning?
Yeah, if you're talking about getting additional funding beyond going to the ballot, NCDS and
That's right.
Convergent we work with
That's right.
quite closely. I know Convergent's done quite a few campaigns in Kansas as well. They actually go out to your community and raise money from the business community. So it's slightly different, but also incredibly effective.
We do have a couple of clients. DeSoto, Texas is one that is relying on their economic development tax base. And they had come from Colorado, which had one of the same types of funding mechanisms that you're looking for. And that was a levy or an economic development fee.
Yeah, so our clients are funded obviously in a variety of ways, one of which does happen to come from tax revenue. We have quite a few clients where they get funding from tax revenue and they have to take that out to voters on a regular basis. And we are very involved in the communication strategy to get people to continue to vote yes for those. Other clients, as Ron mentioned, are funded through long-term capital campaigns. We've done a lot of work with Convergent, especially recently, where they go out and it's really that public-private partnership model to demonstrate to the business community that an investment in economic development is an investment in their future business growth. Because as you obviously create new jobs, bring more people to the community, that's more customers for you. Those campaigns typically provide commitments from the private community and utilities, what have you, that lasts over a period of 5 years and then have to be renewed. So that's also very common with our client base. And then, of course, we have a lot of clients who are funded in part by grants, but those are challenging because those come and go. They're not necessarily as consistent. So people are trying to move away from those as a main source of funding and just kind of take them as, temporary increases in their revenue.
And two other ones that I'm familiar with, the Eastern Kentucky that we saw with that group, and also in Northern Minnesota, they've been reliant. They have the IRRB, which is an entity that draws from mining, and then they bring those mining dollars back into economic development efforts for growth of their communities.
Yeah, and another type of, ballot measure that we've definitely supported our communities in getting passed is in Nebraska. They have the LB 840 program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that program has to be renewed by voters, and it can be a really useful tool in starting businesses in local communities and helping to fund some infrastructure or expansion projects. But again, LB 840, just like many measures that fund economic development, is often misunderstood. So our work has really come down to educating people on how this has impacted specific businesses in their community, how those businesses have created jobs, and why it's important to continue to fund investments in that way.
My name's Greg, but what other expenses should we expect? I mean, is there expenses for texting, for any advertising, for, I don't know, Facebook, posting ads on Facebook? What are the gotchas that we're not thinking of? If we budgeted $50,000, is that what it's gonna cost us to get all the way through an election? Or would there be a third part if this goes to a ballot? Kind of give me a sense of how much this thing's really, is a 50 is what it's gonna cost us, or are we gonna exceed that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So at Golden Shovel, we don't like gotchas and we don't like any of that. So our pricing is all inclusive. I do not anticipate any other expense than the cost for you to actually physically put this on the ballot. Our work does not include that.
And I would just add that the only thing on top of this, where if you were to, as we were going through this, and you were to start to ask for additional services, like we do the video component or something, then we would obviously go back and look at the cost for that. But what you have here is the all-inclusive side. We really don't, as Bethany said, we've been around too long to know that this is a small space and you don't treat your clients that way. We want to knock it out of the park. And as I tell the clients that I work with, we're pretty good at what we do, but we're really good when things go sideways, because there will be hiccups there throughout the process. And we're always going to make sure that we get you over in a smooth way.
Yeah. So no, in regards to paying for ads, paying for texting, this pricing is inclusive of that.
But of course, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I wouldn't say, do you have more money in the couch cushions that we don't know about?
Don't borrow money. What, is there any options to, let's say we do the first phase, and this initial polling just comes back terrible. I mean, 80% of the poll says we would never support a tax increase, and we don't care about economic development. We're tired of high taxes. I want my taxes cut, and I don't see how this is gonna work. You have a very tall hill to climb.
Right.
Is there any way, I mean, after we get the initial polling, that we can say, hey, we don't think this is gonna go any further and stop, or are we committed to the whole 50, or?
Yeah.
I would be very comfortable in us drafting a contract in such a way where we had some benchmarks to where if it looked like it was impossible, that we would not proceed with phase 2.
To your point, our reputation's on the line as well. And, I tell the clients, you always have the ability to pump the brakes. If we're going down a path and we see it and you see it, we wouldn't be doing our job if we're not honest with you. And if we don't say to you, hey, you've got no shot at this, but hey, do the other 30,000 because we need the money. That would be the wrong approach with you. And you're going to tell, we would rather see you on that last slide on the references rather than the other side. So absolutely, we want to make sure we get that messaging right. And when we work through that polling, as I said, we're really doing an informed thing. We want to find out where people are at, but we want to find out what messages resonate with them so we can amplify those. Our job is really, to ask 3 or 4 or 5 questions to try to get what it is, because we know that voters will exercise their number one option of saying no as often as they can. But if we can inform them in a way that yes makes more sense and find the right message behind it, then I think that's where your campaign becomes very successful. And frankly, if we can't get to that, you're right. The 30,000 doesn't make any sense because we're in an uphill battle and everybody's going to be frustrated.
Yeah, so we could just put some triggers into a contract that would say if this percentage, you know, is interested and it can be achieved, well obviously legal language, and I'm not a lawyer, then it would trigger phase two. If not, then phase two would not go forward. We could do something like that.
We'd be willing to come forward to maybe just emphasize what he was asking, say that, okay, this is the wrong year, the wrong time to do this for various reasons we're looking forward to. That you can look and see what's going on, and we're gonna talk about that afterwards, but you're gonna see that in phase one. They said,
Sure.
okay, oh, this is the wrong time, the wrong year to do this. You'd be willing to come forward with that.
Right. And I
Yeah,
think the
absolutely.
important thing of what you're saying there is, you know, I've been around this long enough to know you never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. That's what the phase one is about. Let's know what those answers are, and then let's talk about how we can help your communities and what the right approach will be.
This, Chris, I got a quick question on the polling and that process. What kind of penetration are we looking at? Are we trying to hit a target of 50% of voters or 50% of the population or 5%? Where are we looking to hit on that polling process?
So on that side of it, there's a couple of things that we want to look at. We want to see what your voter base is, who the likely voters are, but we want to start off with some messaging and testing first of all. Let's start sampling and finding out where people are at and how they react to certain messages, questions, and so forth. And then we'll continually try that until we polish that to where we want. So I don't have a specific answer of what the penetration will be because I don't know what our initial sampling will look like and how further we have to go. I mean, we can run this campaign and we can be 20% into the sampling and things are looking really, really favorable. And then we start doing cross tabs on demographics as far as gender, you know, income level, all that. And once we find the right demographic and how that messaging is and who's likely to vote for this, that's when we can really go deeper into it. And so that's the best answer I can give you until we really start to look at the universe of what's out there for your likely voters for this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question, by the way.
One more question on that. Is this data proprietary, or since we wrote the check, is that our data? Should we not make it to the next level for some whatever reason? Is the data is not proprietary?
The data is yours, and we wouldn't buy or sell it. You know, it's all yours, and we're going to turn it over to you. But one thing I was just came to the top of my mind. I'm pretty sure as we're doing your calls, and you can tell me if this wouldn't work, but we're going to be mentioning K-State #1 a lot in the Jayhawks. So hopefully that will help, right?
Rock chop.
You'll notice I'm not wearing my Nebraska shirt.
Yeah.
What's a rough schedule? I mean, from the time we sign a contract, what kind of schedule would you envision for phase one, phase two?
So in our previous conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you thinking about putting this on the ballot in May? Putting this out to voters in May, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I mean,
Okay.
I would just add to that, just looking at what we have in front of us. Obviously, December is the busy holiday time. If we were to, let's say we were to move forward and you say, go ahead, we get through all the contracts and all that fun stuff that usually takes about 15 days. We're going to start circling the wagons and getting everything ready to go throughout the rest of December. But certainly by mid-January, we need to be hitting this hard. By the end of February, we should have a pretty good idea of what our initial responses are. So then we can adjust for March and April and be ready for May if it's going to work. And that might even be a little long. In my mind, I'm thinking that we're probably going to have to compress that a little bit.
That's what I was thinking too. I mean, I think again, in December, we would need to get this contract in place as soon as possible because our team does need to prepare everything in December. So that way in January, we hit the ground running with the polling process. Ideally, you know, as Ron mentioned, the report on the polling, everything needs to be wrapped up into you by the end of February because you got to be able to make decisions because in March, April, and then whatever time in May that we have, we need to be focused 100% on the marketing and make sure that we get messages in front of people multiple times before they actually get the ballot in the mail.
I think
Bethany,
Dan volunteered to door knock in March if we have to.
Yep, there you go.
This is Lisa. I just want to let the group know that those dates, that the time frame came from my discussions with the county clerk, Janet Klizinski. She, and I cannot probably repeat all the things that are happening next year that impact when a mail-in ballot should happen, but she said April or May is the best time. And she said she will need 90 days notice. So we need to know whether we're going to initiate that mail-in ballot 90 days before that mail-in ballot goes out. So that's where Bethany's getting all these dates.
Well, I think
Okay.
if a contract is signed and we have an agreement, I think we probably need to have the discussion of a schedule and whether May is realistic. There's no need in, trying to rush it. Your first shot's gonna be your best shot at it. And we don't screw it up. And if it means we've gotta wait, a couple months or whatever, or even a year or whatever, I think we would rather do that and do it right than to try to rush it and screw it up. But I think that's a discussion to have once you're under contract.
I think that's
Sure.
really wise. And I think that first phase is going to give us we don't know yet. And so you're right. Why make a decision too soon? Let's see where we're at first.
Yeah, and if the polling is really positive, then you're going to want to strike with the iron top, right? So that information, that data collection is going to be really important to determine if it should go on the ballot in May or not.
And Bethany, I'm sorry, I do have to jump to my 12:30. But I want to thank everyone for the opportunity. And if there's any follow-up for me, Bethany will get that back to me and I'll work that back. But great meeting all of you and looking forward to the possibility of this. I think it'd be a really worthwhile project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Lisa, I've got a question for you. Is there anything, do we need to talk to the county about this at all? I mean, there's nothing that they can do to squash this.
That's what I was wondering about,
Well,
spending money for
they-
something like this.
They also have to be the entity
I know,
to request this.
right.
LCPA, Port Authority cannot submit the request for this to be on a
That's what I
ballot.
thought was the case. I'm a little worried about signing any contracts and then the new commission says, well, we won't do this.
And I did request a work
Yeah.
session and that some of you that were on that email, he said not till after January 10th when the new ones get in. And they do not typically do meetings with outside organizations unless there's a presentation. Yeah, so it's not looking good to get before January 10th.
I want to talk a little more about that after.
Okay. All right, yeah.
All right, well-
Any more questions for presenters?
No.
From anybody?
No.
Bethany,
Well,
you have anything?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having us. I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions if you have them. I know you have some internal discussions that need to take place, but please reach out. We'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Before you leave, Bethany, just since you guys made a reference to Kansas State and University of Kansas.
Yes, Ron did.
Yeah, just for the record, I'm a Winona State graduate and my doctorate came out of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, there you go.
So.
That's great. Well, Ron's an elected official who spends half the year in Minneapolis, so I'll let him know. Thanks, guys. Well, we really appreciate your time today and look forward to furthering the discussion.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bethany.
much. And thank you.
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Have a good one.
Now we move on to the, you've all seen the second one, the Midwest Horizons Marketing LLC. Why they don't have somebody in front of us today. Is there any questions on this one at all? We've got that package a couple days ago.
Not many copies, everybody got a copy.
That's something we can review.
The ones online, if there's any reason, do we need to, for Chris and Vernon, should we put it up on the screen or do you have it in front of you?
I have it on my cell phone. I've read through it. So I don't know if I need to have it up online.
I don't.
Anybody have some pluses or minuses or anything like that? They want to discuss? I thought we brought the most salient points up there.
I think having somebody that's involved in economic development and understands economic development is a plus.
Yeah. Well, and the lack of polling on this.
Yeah.
Is concerning, because
Well-
this assumes that you know
In,
people's general opinion.
may I say, in her
Yeah.
defense, the Port Authority had not even brought up, that was a new, polling was a new thing that
Okay.
came out of a meeting that we had
Okay.
separately. So she honestly wasn't told to include that.
Sorry.
But I don't know if she's had any experience in the economic
I
development
don't
world,
think
but it is kind of a little different arena. The things that are hot points. I mean, I guess to kind of go to your question, Jeremy. Yeah, I mean, we could go through all this, we could go to the county could say, no, we're not gonna put it on the ballot. We could go to City of Leavenworth can put it on the ballot. I guess, I don't know if they can put it on the ballot countywide or not, probably not. But I think if you spend the $20,000, you've got some data. I think it's gonna be hard for them not to put it on the ballot. Sure, they can do anything they want, but it's not costing them anything. We're trying to raise funds, we're trying to do what they asked us to do. If we were to go to them now to try to get their feeling on this, we might as well plan on May of 26,
Right.
because we're getting slow rolled to go talk to them.
I concur with Greg 100%. Right now, we would be stalled by the county administrator, and there's no question in my mind, if I was voting, that they wouldn't even let us put it on the ballot, not because of them, unless we went to each individual county commissioner and got their personal commitment independent of a group. It's just obvious we're getting stalled.
And to Chris's point, it might benefit us to look at a company that is local. And I like the fact that this company is from Leavenworth. Granted, we need to do some more research on them to see if they're able to meet our needs, but at least we can attempt to persuade the county to say, hey, look, we're spending county money in the county versus outside.
I would say the only concern I have about that is if we want to put this on a mail-in ballot in May and we have to let them know 3 or 90 days before, we are in a time crunch. And I don't know if we could gather that information that quickly. I mean, that's just a concern I have.
Well, this has always been my preference, and I think I've said this numerous times, to always spend money in Leavenworth if possible. Granted, that's just my preference, but if the other company, is ready to rock and roll, then we need to look at moving forward.
Well, that's why I asked that question earlier. Can we cut it off at some point? And they're gonna be able to tell us that. And if we could tell them that, well, we have to have this done by May and they can't get everything together, or the second company can't get it all together, then obviously we can cut it off, but we will already have that information from them. As I said, it's ours. And then we can look at perhaps a better marketing campaign further down the line if that's what we have to do. I haven't given up on May, but once again, that's in the county commissioner's hand more than anybody else's. And they're not even gonna be seated until the 10th of January. We have to make a decision with this company before the end of the year for them to hit the ground running.
And I guess if we do spend the initial money on polling, the polling's still gonna be relevant a year from now.
And we were in this exact same position a year ago. And I reached out to all the county commissioners other than one who wouldn't call me back. Sorry, Chris, but.
Yeah, not mine.
But everybody said, hey, don't get in a rush. If you're gonna do it right. And we were looking at, November, December timeframe, doing a May ballot, and everybody said that's too quick. You can't do it that quick. Now, maybe we can with this agency, with some help. But again, I know Janet is very strong in her beliefs of exactly how things should go. And Janet isn't the one we're gonna be working with, because that's gonna change. It's gonna be Fran, which Fran is very smart too. But I don't know that it's the end of the world if it were, we need to look at what else is on the ballot, maybe get some input from our consultant. But, and like you say, get that first study back and see what it says. How big a hill do we have to climb?
Do we know what else is gonna be on the ballot?
I don't, that's an insight.
If you do a mail-in ballot, it has to be a single initiative. It can't be multiple things on a mail-in ballot.
Well, I know Lansing schools, they're doing some polling now, looking at something, I think.
Well, I'm told that they are going to do a bond issue. And anything in 25 is going be uphill. As a resident, not speaking as elected official, but as a resident, before they had the last budget hearing, the school was almost 50% of my property taxes, and they went up 25 to 30%. So my $4,200 went to $5,500. And there's a lot of people that's not happy about that. So any initiative to say tax levy, you're gonna be pushing uphill.
If I'm not mistaken, Leavenworth's in the same pinch, or are they not asking?
I am told that, but I don't know it firsthand. I just know Lansing because I get stuff and I paid my taxes yesterday.
If I'm not mistaken, when we were in front of the county commission the last time, I think they mentioned that Leavenworth is gonna have an increase in school taxes. You were there, did they not mention that? Leavenworth?
Yes, I apologize. Dan Armitage just texted me, that's why I'm trying to find out if it's something that he needs to tell me before the meeting is over.
When we went in front of the county commission last time to, request funding, I think they brought it up then, hey, we're gonna see a tax increase. Despite the support that we had in both, visits with the county commission. But I'm a bit concerned about the fact that we can't really hit the ground running until the 10th. That gives us 2 weeks, to be quite honest. I'm not against the investment. I think that's exactly what we need to do, because it's gonna give us polling numbers that we've never had before. I think they brought up the numbers at 50,000 voters or so, and there are 34,000 people who voted in the presidential campaign. Does that mean there's gonna be 15,000 will vote for this? I don't know, but they can tell us that. And I think that would behoove us moving forward.
And my comment was not to speak against it, it's just kind of a reminder of a potential risk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's all a risk, because we don't know what the new commission is gonna do for us.
Yeah.
At this point.
Well, if it has to be done by May, I'm just doing some backward planning. And it takes them, let's say, 30 days to get spun up. That's February, March. That's only 60 days. I don't think you have more than phase 1 available to you. I think in being realistic, and I know it's a risk for us because of the budget situation with the county, but I think we need to be looking at 2026.
I can't argue with you, but the nice thing about it, we have that first piece of data. Are we willing to risk that amount of money out of the funds that we have now, which are gonna be, that's the last funding measure that we know that we've got. We're hopeful to go back in front of the board in January to get a little bit of what's left, but I'm not anticipating that.
Now, is 2026 it's a voting session, right? It's gotta have to be a mail-in,
It is,
walk-in.
Remember, you got some of the state representatives,
Yeah.
and then you've got the cities, don't you?
Right, you got half of our city council that's gonna be up.
I think half of Leavenworth.
And it has to be cheaper if it's on the 26th ballot instead of a mail-in ballot.
But normally your mail-in ballots are a lot more successful on a tax increase than an in-person. That's what Janet had said.
I don't know if there's been, but maybe one, he told me a while back, I was on the Pacer School, last time they did theirs, their committee. And I think she said there's only been one mail-in ballot to ever fail in Leavenworth County. It was one that somebody put out there, did it at an odd time, didn't get a good promotion, and the ballot, just had not enough people return ballots. But the rest of it all passed. However, they were done with campaigns for a lot longer than 2 months.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I would think that we ought to, my opinion is we go ahead and hold until next year, but start the process now, and the data is critical. And within a strategic plan on this, map out how we're going to get other people engaged. And I'm convinced that we need to do a separate mail-in ballot and stay away from any other political hot button that might be out there. If we can get it to convince people that this is a good thing for them, they don't have to guess about, well, what about this next thing on the ballot? Is it goofy or not goofy? Or it just puts us in a position that they only have to decide on one thing, and then how good a salesman are we?
I was curious as to whether or not their $30,000 pricing for, excuse me, phase 2 is based on a 2 or 3 month campaign. Because if we're talking about doing 6 to 9 month campaign, are they gonna charge us more for phase 2?
I think you gotta kind of go down the road and see where you end up to with phase 1 study. And, you know, if you're not gonna put it on until May of 26, obviously some of their education, their ads and all that, you wouldn't do that until, you know, January, February, March or whatever of 26, you wouldn't want to do it now.
90 to 120 days before.
Yeah, so I would think you would save that money. Would you have some extra? Maybe, but I think the polling would probably be similar, I would think, unless something major happened.
So you're not talking about extending the campaign timeline, you're talking
Yeah.
about just pushing the.
When we engage them.
Yeah, I mean, you may extend it a month or something. You know, instead of compressing it to a month and a half, maybe we do it over 3 months.
Okay.
But it sounded like from Bethany that wasn't gonna be an issue.
Especially if you're gonna hit each, potential voter 2 or 3 times. You can't, I mean, I'm still saying stop to text messages wanting money from the presidential one. You know?
Well, now, we were working with a May timeframe for educating me, maybe I missed something. Why were we working on a May being the timeframe for a vote? Any particular reason? Is there, does Janet have a
Janet
particular?
thought would be the best.
Can I just, Dan did, have something he wanted to talk about. Dan was the one with Golden Shovel. He said Bethany and I were just talking and we wanted to suggest that we could put in the contract and opt out if the county's new administration doesn't want to put this on the ballot. Or if the initial polling just simply suggests this overwhelmingly wouldn't pass, like was brought up as a question. In either of those instances, we would stop after phase 1, that 20,000 initial investment. And like we discussed, you'd own all that data information that comes from phase 1.
I mean, I think we need to move forward with it, and I know Vernon and I agree with you, Vernon, I want to spend the money in Leavenworth County, but I'm just concerned of the expertise.
Yeah.
And
Golden
I agree with that also. I mean, we got this one shot, we got this pot of money, and we don't want to use it unwisely. So I do agree with you 100%.
So you saying doing a 2026 ballot?
No,
No.
well, I think right now, the motion I would make is to enter in a contract with Golden Shovel as they presented. And let's just see where it leads us.
With the out clause, obviously,
Yeah, with the alcohol.
what they allow us to go through the data.
But let's see where we end up. And I mean, if we can't do it, if the time frame isn't there, we'll address it then, but
So just understand you're voting to spend the $20,000 without going for the commissioners.
I'm voting to spend up to 50,000 without going to the commissioners, yes.
I'll second.
Okay, hold on.
You're right.
I mean, we don't have to go to the commission. No.
I thought somebody said that.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, but I don't, they've already allocated the money
Yeah, we can
to.
spend it how we
So
see.
you-
Technically, they can't have it back.
So you said spend up to 50,000 on the,
Golden shovel
okay.
with the opt-out
Got
clauses.
it.
I mean, they asked us to do it, so I mean,
Yeah. And we can't go back to the county to ask them because
No.
we won't have an answer until May.
Even with that January, because that's when the new commissioners come
Well,
in.
yeah, but they'll slow roll us. It'll be May.
Well, and
And then
much
it's
like,
budget season.
Who made the second?
much like they've done before, when they've asked us to go to Wichita State for economic answers, and we felt we were wasting money to give them the same answer, but they never read it.
right,
But honestly, they never read the bloody thing, but, we're looking for the answers.
but it still protects us,
Yes,
having this.
Well, and it gives us something, if we do postpone it, when we go for budget hearings, we can say, hey, we are doing something, this is the study we got, this is our plan, we're not just sitting on our hands, not doing anything. You know, give us one more year, you promise you give us our funding back next year, if you cut it this year. I know Biden promised he wouldn't.
But we still may be in that boat until we get the money, if it does pass, asking them for money for interim funding, so.
but we've got money in the kitty right now.
I know, but
In that particular sense, I wanna save it for the salaries and everything like that, but we gotta protect the interests of this committee. I think we have to prove to the people that are out there in the county that we're willing to go to, the end. The best we have to do to protect this committee in 80 years of this investment. That would be part of the education process too, I believe. But,
And I think it's gonna take some time too, because if you do a campaign, you're gonna have to go to the cities and say, okay, Lansing, Leavenworth, you've been donating this much every year, this passes. We assume that funding would go away, what are you guys gonna do with that money? Are you gonna use it to lower taxes?
If it's my money, what business is it of yours?
I'm a taxpayer, I hired you, you work for me.
Yeah, you're asking as a port authority.
I understand, but I think, I'll use Joe Sixpack since the school board did, but he's gonna say, okay, well, what are you
I've
gonna
been
do with
looking
that
for
money?
$20,000, because I already got a project to go.
There you go, that's fine. But you list
But I
that.
wasn't gonna raise taxes to do it. I'm waiting for the money to come available.
Brian, any input from you? I mean,
The biggest thing I think about is getting more data on special elections and make sure you have all those facts for, like, what has ever passed on a special election in Kansas, what hasn't, 'cause that data is out there somewhere.
And Fran's got it.
Yeah,
Fran will
to
give
know
it to
what-
us, and I almost,
what date, when did they do them? Were they March, April, May timeframe? Has there ever been one in a different month? Just for, because if you're shooting for, if there's 55,000 registered voters and only 35 voted in the presidential, what did the Baser passed their last school? How many voters did they have and how many people actually voted? So that really tells you how many people you're really countywide, what's the percentage of people that actually vote in those? Before
well,
you
who
spit,
voted for the 1 cent sales
Yeah.
tax for the county that was countywide?
go back and get those data numbers before you decide on a.
I think that golden shovel,
Yeah.
that'll be part of what they.
Make sure you get the right data, not just
Yeah.
numbers that say it's okay. I think Leavenworth is gonna be very specific to our demographic is gonna be different than anybody else's demographic. Make sure it's the right people we're hitting with this study. And the other thing that I have is, I've had this for, make sure we can properly explain the difference between the Port Authority and LCDC. Make that line very clear and defined, so there's an understanding of who is what, who isn't what.
Right.
I guess that's the main concern of. I run into people all the time that think that the Port Authority is one thing and LCD is another thing, and then they both talk out of the same side of their mouth that they're all the same. So make sure we understand that when we're out there pushing something, who is or isn't pushing this, so we have a fallback of who's to receive the funding, who's not receiving the funding, how are we funding both groups with this money? So everybody's on the same sheet of music, 'cause we definitely don't need any distractors as we start to go down the line.
well, when
Well,
I was listening, wondering, I'm sorry.
have we got a commitment from the LCDC board on this thing? I mean, our board's debated it, and it sounds like we're going the same direction. I guess the question would be, where's LCDC stand on this?
Yeah. We briefly in our last executive committee talked about it, and there was not unanimous support. I'll just say that nicely. For a ballot initiative.
May I say, there was also a question during that executive committee about what other options, why wouldn't we consider a portion of a sales tax? And we talked about that, and someone said that it might affect the Port Authority's ability to own land. I did call Molly Howie yesterday. She is the director of Go Topeka. And if you don't mind, I'll give you a quick rundown of how that works. They are funded by a portion of a sales tax. It started in about 2000, and they started with a 1/4 cent sales tax, and that was for 15 years. They did a second vote, and they gained a 1/2 cent sales tax, and they're in about year 7 of that right now. The 1/2 cent sales tax has specific projects for which it will fund, such as infrastructure, road improvements, quality of life projects, including like an event center, zoo, bike path. And then one of those line items is economic development, just that broad of a exact word. The Joint Economic Development Organization, JADA, is made up of county and city commissioners, and they have an interlocal agreement that outlines how the tax is divvied up. And the way it works is the first $5 million goes directly to Go Topeka, divvied by the JADA organization. And JADA contracts with Go Topeka at 3-year terms. The remainder is divided up between the county and city to spend on the identified projects that I listed. It's about a 52%, 52-48% split. Go Topeka conducts quarterly presentations to JADA, much like what we've done in the past. And then JADA approves Go Topeka's annual budget. There have been times when Go Topeka has been asked to support quality of life projects, but they've been of sticking to primary and jobs and employers. They do have a current issue. The problem is they made that a flat number for economic development as opposed to a percent of that sales tax. And so now, it used to $5 million used to be 44% of the sales tax collected, but it's now 28% of the sales tax collected. And as Go Topeka is asked to do more, that net present value is getting less. So what they're going to do is they're working to rewrite or revise the interlocal agreement rather than having to go back to a vote.
Are we gonna have to have an interlocal agreement?
This is just this is just their scenario. I don't know all the details.
Well, I know that the fire districts have to have an interlocal agreement, and it has to go through the county, presented at state for approval between government entities. You got a number of cities here, along with the county. It seems to me somebody's gonna ask for interlocal agreement. Otherwise, who controls, if we get a bond issue, are we really underneath the county?
We're kind of unique. It's us and I think Junction City or Erie County that has a port authority, or the two in Kansas.
Yeah.
Topeka, is that, what kind of organization is that?
They're a 501c6 economic development organization, contracted.
And I don't know what the difference in the rules and regulations were. We're a little different. The same with like an interlocal agreement. We've kind of already got an interlocal agreement, with Lansing, Leavenworth, Baser, Commonwealth, Port Authority. So I kind of see Leavenworth more as a standalone entity, maybe as what Go Topeka or some of those are, but I'm not sure we're comparing apples and apples.
Right.
No, I don't think it's even close to comparing. The Port Authority, by its statute and by how it was designed, is an interlocal company because all cities excluding Easton and Linwood. So we've already got a written agreement on the ground to prepare the Port Authority. Then Port Authority has statute, which you've all seen copies of that Tim Gerard provided. And it is a legal entity that I don't think we would need interlocal agreements. We've already got it in place. We've got the fundamental footprint or the foundation in place. So I mean, that's how I interpreted what Tim wrote us a letter on.
And I think if we had some questions, I think you could reach out to Gilmore Bell.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they do.
Yep.
And they know what the rules are. They've been through it with Leavenworth before on the sales tax where, you know, that money did go for economic development but the funding had to be through the cities or through the county. It couldn't be through the Port Authority.
Well, I don't want to be a pain in the butt, but I want to go back to the question on is LCDC in support, because they're getting a fifth of this money. And if we don't have support of that, are we dumb to even try it?
Chris, if you want a more formal answer, the board meets Friday, and then we could take a vote or have a full-on discussion at that point.
Well, I think it would be a little bit embarrassing going to the commissioners and saying, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to give 20% to LCDC, but LCDC doesn't support it. That doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to everybody else, but it doesn't make sense to me that if we're all not going the same direction, then we need to figure that out before we spend 20 grand or 50 grand or whatever else we're spending.
Yeah, I just recommend we put it on the agenda and get an answer. I get your point taken.
I think that's a good idea. And when you brought it up before, you probably didn't have as much information with marketing and.
Well, I wasn't at that meeting.
Yeah, it was after our last meeting we had, and I think the biggest question I couldn't explain is what type of question are we thinking about putting on the ballot?
Yeah.
And is it definitionally a bond? Is it a mill levy? Is it a set dollar amount? Is it a percentage? Those are the questions I think that some of the others had that I couldn't answer. I said, I don't know those answers. And I think they weren't willing to support something. They didn't know what the basics of the parameters were. I don't think anybody was against trying to get the money. Nobody's against trying to get the money. I think it's are we dead on arrival if we try a sales tax? Are we a mill levy? What are we going for? If we knew what we think we're going for, I think it'd be a much easier conversation.
I thought we were going for a mill levy. I didn't know that was a question.
Well, we talked about a sales tax also.
Well, we can't do sales tax because we're capped. We've already hit the cap in the county anyways. The county can't do a sales tax because they're at the maximum amount. So what I thought it was mill levy.
Well, one of the things that we may have to look at somewhere down the road is the connection between the Port Authority and the county commissioners in that particular regard. In the basic statutes of what we got written up, Chris, if we become captains of our own mill levy in that particular regard, outside of the appointment procedures, then we don't have to answer to the county. And I'm not meaning to stuff anything in their face. I'm simply saying, if they recognize the fact that what we're doing, and I'll jump all over here, but somewhere down the road, we're gonna need another industrial park. In order to do that, we have to have the money to do it. You all are in the business far more than I am in explaining to me how much money that's gonna cost. The county's not gonna pay that. For Christ's sakes, they can't even pay to fix the courthouse where we have our meetings, without cutting funding for everything else. So we're gonna get money through the years if this is successful. It's gonna sit there in that account, and we have to educate the populace. This is what we're doing it for. We're not gonna be given 80 acres. In the future. I don't know anybody, you guys know more of those people than I do, they're gonna stand up and give us 80 acres for free in the county where it needs to sit on a highway and everything like that. And we can't ever forget that, and that's gotta be part of the education process. In order to bring more businesses here, we have to have the land available for them to do it. Okay, they're not gonna go in those buildings in downtown Leavenworth. But at some point, we'll have to look at that Port Authority and how it's written. And if we're successful with this, it'd be separate ourselves outside of the idea that the cities can put their personnel on the board And the county of Leavenworth can put their personnel on the board in that particular regard. But other than that, we don't answer. We don't have to go back to the county commission every year. They make quite clear that they're not gonna give us anything. This is twice now since I've been on the board. They've cut us out, this time completely. We don't have a future without this.
And
So we-
and I totally agree with that. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this conversation is to secure long-term funding of economic development in Leavenworth County that can't be attached by the county and taken and spent on whatever else.
But like Greg's brought up before, so they slow roll us in that particular regard. They'll say, yes, go out and get your own funding. And then if they're afraid of the fact we do get our own funding, that they've lost control over it, are they gonna slow roll that? I don't know. It just disturbs me that after 80 years, we're still fighting this battle.
So if
You-
has to make the ask for this, how are they not gonna want to have their hands involved?
Because once it's voted on the voters and they don't get the money or whatever we vote for.
Not part of their budget.
Oh, well,
That's part of
yeah, kind of it is. Because when you go to revenue neutral, you're gonna run into what Leavenworth did with the library. And all of a sudden, the library, they get, I think it's a certain mill rate, valuation went up, they got more money. Well, they didn't say revenue neutral, so the city had to cut something out of their budget, so the city overall would stay revenue neutral. And that's probably gonna come up at some point.
I'll just also throw this out here, the extension districts, which are also a side, it's on your. In an extension district world, two counties go together and create an extension district in the state of Kansas. They become just like a school board. They're another line item on your tax statement.
Yep.
Jefferson County is in one. I saw a tax statement from Jefferson County. It's its own line item, just like the school. My question on this is, would we, the Port Authority become its separate line item from the county?
That's how I saw it. That's how I thought Tim wrote it, because we are a separate entity.
That's what the statute says.
That's,
Now, we've been closely hand in hand work with commissioners through the years. But it's become quite obvious that they don't want to have anything to do with the funding for us anymore, so we have to explore that option.
just to bring this up, because I have the knowledge, the extension office in Leavenworth County is talking about doing a vote to go to be their own taxing authority as well. So we may not want to convolute, you're gonna have 2 or 3 different organizations all trying to get their own taxing authorities in 25, if you go forward in 25. I just heard that, they had their meeting here just last week. So they haven't done it, I mean, officially, but
Maybe it's a race to get it, I don't know.
That's the other, I was just thinking that too, it could go bad either way, if you wait till 26 and they get it, then people could use the excuse they don't want yet another entity.
So I've got to believe that either one of these marketing companies, if you want to talk about Golden Shovel's Fund, can help educate us through their history, through what they've dealt with everywhere else in the various cities that they've been in, various counties, to help us
We can't do this without experts like them.
pinpoint our message. If you get invited down to a meeting somewhere, or you get invited down to a meeting somewhere, we can all be on the same page and have the same bullet points that we're trying to teach them about. I've got to believe the people of Leavenworth County understand. They've watched what happened in Wyandotte County, for goodness sakes. And Wyandotte County was one of the poorest counties that we had in the nation when I was growing up, and look what's happened to them. And we're unique. We're a port authority.
Yeah.
We're one of the unique, if you want to look, and I beat this like a dead horse, I know. Look what Port Authority does in Kansas City. Look what it does in St. Louis. Now, these are huge organizations, but it's still under quote unquote Port Authority guidelines. So we're unique. We're one of only 2 places in Kansas that's got that ability. And we can reach out to people that know about port authorities and what they've done historically and ask them. But yeah, somewhere down the road, I see it separating itself from the county commission outside of membership. Each one of our cities, and I'd hope to bring Linwood and Easton back into that too, because they're part of the county.
It would include any incorporated entities, right?
Right.
Which would bring them back in.
They elected not to be, I'd love for them to be part of it. The message got to cover the whole county, for goodness sakes. So it's, outside of Leavenworth having 2 representatives, and one of them happens to be me, the other one's seat's open right now. And that's not gonna be filled for some time, I don't think either. So,
I would amend my motion to make subject to a positive vote from LCDC. From Chris's comments, because I agree with him. I think that's important that we got everybody on board and we're all speaking the same language. And if they're not on board, I think we need to regress and think about it.
Concur.
when she was talking to it,
And what positive?
A positive, endorsement from,
Gotcha. LCDC.
and when they were talking, when she was talking about it, tell me I'm wrong, you guys heard the same message that she gave us. She was talking about not to approach the business leaders and everything. They're talking about your group and you guys and everything. They're gonna be approaching next for a handout. As just a collective, for goodness sake. So I don't think you want them in your face asking for money in that particular regard. But that's, that's who tell me I'm wrong, that's who I thought they were referring to after that.
I didn't get that.
Okay,
I think that was if we were talking about just doing a capital campaign.
Yeah.
Like one of those other groups that they work for, that Convergent Kansas, they do it as a capital campaign to raise money instead of a mill levy. What's other alternative instead of?
okay,
That's the way I think.
Okay. and I agree, maybe I misunderstood, but they're, if we don't succeed and everything like that, their next aim would be, this is for the community.
But
So we
just,
got a motion.
I was gonna ask for Greg to restate that motion since he amended it. Make sure we get it right.
I would have Mary stated, she got it written down.
Yeah, I just got, he made the motion to spend up to $50,000 with Golden Shovel on contract with the opt-out clause and positive endorsement from LCDC.
yes.
And I second it.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Vernon?
Aye.
Okay, aye. Motion carries. Any opposed? Thank you. Any further conversation? I want to thank everybody for coming in on the emergency session.
So next steps, we will get with Golden Shovel and then report back in 2 or 3 weeks.
LCDC meeting.
Well, yeah,
LCDC.
That's positive, then at least it gets Golden Shovel and let's get a contract and start looking at the contract. We may need to get Tim Gerard or somebody to take a quick look at it.
And I think once we know those parameters, we need to ask Lisa to get us on the schedule of the new commissioners in January, because they're gonna have a lot of stuff in their plate. We need to get on the schedule.
Well, we don't need to go to them to spend this money though.
No.
This,
But I have asked already, and
I saw that. He's been dragging his feet the last time.
how do I guess I can reword it, so we make it.
And Kim, now, this may be an obvious answer, I don't know. Once this is all done, do you just need one signature, or do we have to gather again for all the signatures?
for what?
To spend that money, once we got the motion approved.
We already approved it as an organization.
Yeah, so as long as
Yeah.
LCDC provides their positive endorsements, then we can move forward with the Golden Shovel.
Okay, you or I could sign the check.
I think Lisa can, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Obviously voting on forthright, but is the meeting on January 10th set in there
No,
to go?
No.
Or it's just an opportunity?
He said he just can't, he has to be after that date, because that's when
Well,
they're,
it says January 22nd.
is that what it was?
Yeah, it's, they get sworn in, on the 10th, and they can't do a study session until the 22nd. So it's just, again, it's every way you can drag the thing, it seems to be.
So we need to figure out how to get a study session officially for the county administrator to say no to the study session. I hate to be the negative here, but get him to say the 22nd, the study session, and then say, yes, we'll take that opportunity, and then him to say no, and then you go back to, then you have to work the backside of it, the commissioners. We've requested study sessions and your person keeps telling us no.
And they've been copied on these.
They've been copied.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'll make sure.
We went through this earlier this year where they agreed to study sessions and then came up with some sort of wording to throw us out the door again.
Budget time, they wanted to meet with us, sit down and talk and have a study session, and now.
Like 6 months ago.
And then when we took
Because
out.
when we were there for the budget, there was that extra money from Tom Cole's salary that's still sitting there, he said at year end, there was potential to get
They
it.
gotta go back and ask for that.
And because of cash accrual, he cannot do anything about that till after January 1st.
I think he's lying to you, but
You've been
okay.
there.
He's lying to you, but okay.
He's slow.